Good afternoon, Flagler County. This is Crystal DeWind with the Flagler County Buzz, and we are sitting here with Andrew Werner, one of the candidates running for Palm Coast City Council, District 3. While he's running for District 3 at the seat, everybody in the city of Palm Coast can vote for all of the districts. They are open for everyone in city limits to vote for, correct?
That's absolutely right. So if you live in Palm Coast and you go in to vote, you'll be voting for District 1, District 3, and the mayor this year. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start off, and before we get into the fun stuff with the infrastructure, the development, and all the other stuff, I'm going to start with one of the doozies. I'm sure you're aware of a lot of the conversation going on with the residents and different groups where they're discussing your campaign contributions.
Yeah.
I do know that
You're
having
starting it
looked
off right away with this, huh? Okay.
yeah, let's get the painful one out of the way.
Yeah.
I've looked at them. I look at all of the different candidate contributions. I do know that there are a good number of PACs or organizations that have donated to you. Do you know anything about those PACs? And if so, can you share what they represent?
Yeah. So, PACs are controlled by candidates. They're controlled by, other organizations. In my particular case, my PAC money, I had never received any money from a PAC before until I had a conversation with a friend of mine. His dad is a senator in the state, a guy who I really respect, and so that kind of started a trickle effect. When he donated to me, he said, "Hey, after we had a nice conversation, we definitely align on a lot of things." And he just said, "Hey, we believe in you. I'm going to donate to you." And I said, "Thank you." And he said, "Well, it's gonna, I'm going to be donating out of my PAC." So that was the first one that I got. And that was Senator Doug Broxson, who is a senator out in the Pensacola area. He's actually, someone who I really respect. But then he sort of spread the word about me, and I got to meet a lot of really great people and talk with them. And they also donated from PAC. So the names you need to know are Senator Doug Broxson, another senator in Jacksonville named Clay Yarborough. And then I also got PAC donations from our Speaker of the House, Paul Werner. So those are the guys that donated to me through PACs. People want to, skew it one way or the other, like they're saying that these are special interest groups. These are men who donated to me because they believe in me. Now, the funny thing is, and I hope we get to talk about this a little more, because the same people that are criticizing me have not only supported other candidates who have received PAC money. There's other candidates who have, 3 times as much money as I do, and they have this. I don't know if it's the same PACs, but they have PAC money, and this same group has been out there cheering for them and even donating to that particular candidate. So if you're gonna level criticism, at least be consistent, because that's why I call it cheap. Is because if it's okay for somebody to take PAC money, but it's not okay because they support the person I'm running against, that just makes it a cheap political attack, in my opinion. I've actually been very careful about money. I got into this and I didn't know I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know about the whole how much it would cost. There were people that came to me and said, "Oh, you're running for city council. You're going to need $80,000." And I'm like, "Well, how about $800? That's probably like." So I didn't know what to expect. I didn't go out there and do a lot of fundraising just because I didn't want to do that. People that believed in me approached me about this kind of stuff. So, but I have been careful. I've said no to people that I don't necessarily think that we align, and I feel very happy with the people I've said yes to, and very happy with the people I've decided to say no to.
Okay. Well, I know a lot of people are concerned about whether there are promises behind those PAC money contributions. So can you state with confidence on record that none of them have asked you for any kind of promises? I know it seems like a silly question maybe to you, but there are people that do find it concerning, and history has shown that can be the case.
Well, and I think that is it's a reasonable thing to want to know more about. I think people in Palm Coast have been burned before by people who, who have said one thing and done another, or who they felt have been representing, other interests other than what the people have. And I can assure you that I got into this 100% because I believe in our representative government. And if I were to take money that would have some kind of implications behind how I would vote or not, I think that would make this all a mistake for me. This would just be a waste of time. So that 100%, I can say with 100% autonomy, that there is no possible way that I would ever do that. My vote will be anytime I vote for something, it's because I think it's what's best for the people of Palm Coast, the community. Those are the things that are going to drive my vote. And I did a lot of work to find out what's important to the people of Palm Coast, just so that way when I do get up there and have a vote, it will come from that, not from who gave me contributions, and I mean, they haven't really specified what they think that I'm beholden to. They just say, oh, it's a pact, so he's beholden. So when people say that, I say, well, what particular pact do you think beholds me to something? And there's really not an answer there because there isn't anything. So I can say with 100% autonomy that I will be voting for what I think is important for the people of Palm Coast. And I thank people that donated to me. I believe that all my contributions are above board, and I think that when people are attacking me about that, it's just for political interest. Yeah, but like I said, I mean, for people to be concerned about that's something that I understand, just because I know there's a history there, and I totally respect that. I hope they listen to me and they understand and they can hear me say when I say that there is absolutely nothing that would behold me to anyone but the people of Palm Coast.
All right. So since you mentioned the interests of the residents, obviously over at least this last year, there's been quite a few different bigger ticket items out there being spoken about at the city council meetings. So I want to start with the September 3rd evening meeting that it was quite lengthy. And at the end of it, Pontieri brought up some infrastructure issues, specifically the expansion for one of the roads to out west and for the stadium that they're looking to fund. And she had spent her Labor Day weekend reading over these DRIs, only to discover that the landowners for those DRIs were supposed to be responsible for that infrastructure that we are currently looking for funding elsewhere. So with all of that being uncovered, how do you plan to, if you're elected, how do you plan to fix what she uncovered to bring that benefit back to the residents, since the ball's already been essentially rolled down the hill and the funding's already been received for this road, so the landowner is now off the hook, at least for that. Mm-hmm. How do you plan to rectify that to bring that back to where it's more favorable for the residents?
Yeah, we need to get back to making sure everything is done in the public. So if there are DRIs that are already established, whether they're 10 or 20 years old, those things need to be out there in the public before we go and ask for appropriations, before we decide to make plans with what we do. We need to make sure that everybody understands what the deal is that we're working with, because I feel like the people need to have a say in our decisions in the city. And if we don't know what's happening, if we don't know what the agreements are already made, how can we be a part of the conversation? So I think we have to do a lot more to really inform people about what's happening. With that DRI, let's get down to what the original agreement was, and let's make that public for everyone to see. We need to do things in the sunshine, in a sense, so that way when the city council's deliberating, when people are attending the city council meeting, we can be informed about our opinions about what we go and advocate for. So I just think that we just need to be more open about what's happening. The fact that was uncovered and the details are still sort of not necessarily out there for everything for the public to see.
We did post those DRIs in one of our articles on the Flagler County Buzz. So if you do search for that particular city meeting, those DRIs are linked in there on there for anyone to read.
Okay, so so that's good, and I think that if if that kind of thing is done by the city, like you're a self promotion news article, shouldn't that be done by the city so that way, hey, this is what is true, and this is what is not as true. The city is in this type of an agreement now, and this is what we're going forward with. These are the reasons we did the decisions. I haven't seen that come from the city. Maybe that's happened, but I haven't seen that come directly from the city itself. And I think that is the responsibility that they have. We have a big budget for marketing. We have a big advertising budget. We should be using that to make sure that everybody is informed, so that when we have these kind of decisions, everybody knows how to respond.
Okay. And knowing that this just happened with these 20-year-old DRIs or 14-year-old DRIs, if you're elected, is that something you're going to want to be directing staff to do, to look into all of the existing DRIs, MPDs, and make sure that we're not letting these big multi-million, multi-billion-dollar developments off the hook for infrastructure that they're supposed to be supplying?
Yeah, and technically the city has people that are working on that stuff, but the city council's responsibility is for the people, right? Mm-hmm. So if that's not being done, we need to have advocates who are sitting on the dais who are willing to take that next step. So when we're looking at new places that are being opened up for discussion with development, like in this case, that road that's happening out west, we need to be advocating as city council members to make sure that information is getting out there, because apparently it's not. So I think, that bridge between the city and the community, that's what they vote us in for. They vote us in to make sure that we're out there advocating for them, because, in a sense, the public isn't always informed about things, and the city is doing business. They're trying to, they're in the day-to-day stuff. So, the city council hears all these people come up and say, hey, we have a problem with this. That's when they come into play, and they should go into talk with staff and say, hey, this is important to the public. Let's do a better job with this. Let's get out there and get all this data out there so people can see it. Let's do a presentation at one of the city council meetings, and let's let public comment do its thing. Because I think, you can get a lot of data from public comment. I really do. So if you put the information out there, people that are interested, they're going to show up and talk about it. And then you get consensus to some degree as to where people land. But if the work's not being done, that's where the city council needs to be the advocate for the people that voted them in, to go to the city and say, hey, we need to see more of this.
Okay. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the budget. That's obviously always a very hot topic, especially with our budget being over 90% residential when it comes to the ad valorem taxes. We have less than 10% of our ad valorem revenue for the city of Palm Coast comes from industry. So the budget is a really big deal for a lot of residents, since they are the ones funding most
Absolutely.
of it. So do you have any concerns about our budget and where it stands on a regular yearly basis? And do you feel that there is a need for the forensic audit that so many members of the public are calling for?
Cool. You asked like 5 questions in there, so I'll try to get after all of that. First of all, yes, there's a concern with how we collect our taxes and how our city is progressing. When you have just above 90% of the tax coming from residential property, anytime we need, new roads, new infrastructure, guess who we're going to be coming at with our hands open? We're going to be coming at the residents. We need to really do a better job of recruiting more industry here, just because that's the healthy thing to do. When you have a community that's unbalanced, and I'm going to use health here as kind of an example, you don't, if you're unhealthy in a way, you don't continue to do what you're doing that keeps you unhealthy. You try to make adjustments. So I really think we need to do a better job with bringing in business, and that means being better to those people who want to come here and do business. I talk to a lot of business owners here in Palm Coast and say, I went through a lot just to get here. I've talked to a few that said, I regret coming here with all the things that I know now about the regulations that they have me on or have been putting on me, that it's just too difficult. There's a lot of ways that I think I can boost my business, but based on the regulations here, it's causing me trouble. And they say, well, we've taken care of that. I've heard people say that, but I've talked to business owners that have told me that. So we need, if we're unbalanced in our tax, where we collect our taxes, and our city is becoming unhealthy, we need to do a better job of responding to that data and bringing in more business to offset that. So I'd be really someone who's really advocating for that. And everyone says, we need more business, we need more business. But we also need the space. So that's kind of a conundrum there, because people are, there's a lot of people who are having trouble with the growth because it really is growing very quickly here. But we don't have space to bring, bigger industries. So we need to make space for that kind of stuff. And I think that needs to be said, as we're growing, we need to be careful about, continuing to make mistakes. We're continuing to do all this residential building, but we're not adding the commercial. And I think that is a mistake. So when it comes to the budget, the big question is, because I'm a big tax guy, and I say we shouldn't be raising our taxes on our residents. The residents have been fitting the bill forever now in Palm Coast, So I think that we need to, again, adjust the way that we do things as a city. We can't just keep saying we need this, so let's raise taxes. We need this, even though in the last couple of years they've rolled back the millage one year, and then this year it was a lower rollback to some degree. It wasn't a full rollback, so it essentially becomes a tax increase, just a slight one. We just need to do a better job of fixing our problems, So if we bring industry here, we won't have to rely so much on the residential folks. And then they say, well, if you don't want to raise taxes, and you would probably ask this too, if you don't want to raise taxes, where's this money coming from that you want to do all these things? And I think that just like it works just like any household, right? So we have to prioritize what's important to us. And I think the residents have said infrastructure is important. The beauty of our city is important. Those are things that people want to continue to prioritize. And then we have to make some hard choices, whether it's, cutting things that we really like at my house. It'd be great to do a lot of things that we really want to do and we think are great, but, with a budget, not necessarily always there for that. So we just have to make some hard choices. Otherwise, I think that we're going to have a city that continues to try to raise taxes to meet the need. We need to do what we can to shrink, to make this place more affordable, and stop relying on our property tax and our folks that are really fitting the bill for the city to solve our problems.
And do you feel that there's a real need for this forensic
audit? Oh, the forensic audit. So I've talked to a couple people that are involved with the forensic audit thing. So here's what I understand. They have some concerns. A lot of what they talk about is we need to bring sunlight so we can find out, we're getting close to $500 million in our budget. So where's all this money going to? So they want to know more. And at the same time, then the city comes back and says, well, we have done audits. Every year we do audits, and everything comes back really, really great. Like they're getting awards in some cases for how their budget comes out. So, and the audits that they do with the city. So somewhere there's a disconnect of the people and what the city is saying. So what I tell folks is this: number one, a forensic audit is very expensive. I've heard astronomical numbers get thrown out there. I don't know exactly how much it would be. I've heard something in the millions,
from what the firm said it could be.
And the firm came and did a presentation, and they said each individual section of the city or the department of the city would cost a certain amount. So even if you broke it into certain departments, this is what it would cost. And he was talking about in the millions of dollars. So that's what I remember him saying. So I say this. Number one is, if there's fraud, we should be able to find that and prove it. That would give us cause to do a more investigative audit. Or if there's waste, if you can prove that there's waste, that would give us, some information that would want to get us into a more, intrusive audit. I haven't found that yet. If we found something like that and they said, well, there's all this money that isn't accounted for, I understand going forward with something like that. But I feel it to be a little bit of a conundrum because we're trying to save our tax dollars. But what if we do this big audit and that's going to cost us from tax dollars? So do we use our tax dollars to find out if there's wasting tax dollars? And if we don't find anything, we just did what we were trying to, prevent from happening. So it's a bit of a tough thing. If there was evidence of it, I'd totally get behind that. Until then, it's hard to really justify, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So since your discussion on the budget kind of touched on the small businesses and business in general in Palm Coast, do you have some plans on how you would help the small business community in Palm Coast, whether that's working with some of the codes for advertisements on vehicles and driveways, or whether that's loosening some of the requirements for signage in the city? Do you have anything in mind for how you would help the business community here in Palm Coast?
Well, I mean, I'll just be consistent with my campaign throughout the entire time. Is just being present and being willing to listen to folks that have something that they want to accomplish with the city. So there are a lot of great business groups already in town that are getting together and talking about what they need. I think as a city council member, that's where you could jump in and just be a part of those and just say, hey, what's important to you guys? Because you can hear a lot of great information right there. And then you take that back to the city and say, how do we help these folks who want to do business here? How do we make this a place? Because I think Palm Coast is such a great place to start a business. We have a safe city. We have a clean city. It's a great place to live. We got great people that live here. It would be just a great place to be, to foster a small business. But we need the cooperation of the city. And that's where, again, I think a representative like a city council member could really be the advocate for the people. So getting in there, being a part of those groups. I know that Good Vibes here. We're here at Good Vibes with some great drinks. So I just wanted to give them a shout out. But I know there's some great groups that work or that meet here. You can talk to a lot of folks that are trying to start business, and they can tell you a ton of things that they'd like to see happen. And it's really individual to each business. But if we're listening to what people need, taking that back to the city and asking them to accommodate people, I think we can make this a great place to foster good small business. And then there's the city recently in the last 6 months hired an economic development coordinator, and that's another person that I think we should bring right along with us to some of these small business groups and marketing groups where they can sit in. Right now, I think it's just one guy, but where their department can sit in and listen to people who are trying to do business in town. Because really, this is a partnership we need to have together. It shouldn't be the city against people trying to do business. When we have our tax structure the way it is, where businesses are already so underrepresented, we need to do even more to make this a great place to foster small business.
Okay. So I want to touch on a little bit of development. I know that earlier this year you spoke out for Seminole Woods with the developments that were going on there, and I know that you had said you were against the overdevelopment. But recently, at the last city meeting, Councilperson Pontieri made her second motion for a moratorium on residential building, and this time she said a year, or until the infrastructure was caught up. Where do you stand on that issue? Should she make that motion again after the new council sits? Are you in favor of that until things catch up like she was talking about, or are you against a moratorium on residential building?
Yeah. So first I'll talk about the Seminole Woods issue. So what they were trying to do is bring in some high density things into a neighborhood that really wasn't in favor of that. And I got a lot of my petitions, because I'm District 3, so I got a lot of my petitions from Seminole Woods. And I remember going to this one specific lady's house, and she took my clipboard. And just so you know about me, when I have an opinion, it's based on what I've heard from residents, okay? So this lady took my clipboard and she said, where do you stand on neighborhoods and high density development? I have a woods across from me, and I'm worried that that is going to be turned into something that doesn't fit our neighborhood. And I said, I understand. Anytime we're looking to do something like this, I think there's two things you have to look at. Does it fit the neighborhood that this proposal is going into? And number two, will it present an undue burden to the infrastructure and the local folks that already live there? So that's kind of the lens that I'm looking through. I'm looking through the lens of what the people around them feel is a good fit for their neighborhood. Uh, you know, I think that neighborhoods should have a say when it comes to these matters, because that's why they go out there and they post these things before it goes to the city council, so people can be a part of the decision. So that's the way I see it. Is that I think builders are going to build. That's their job. Okay, city council's job is to regulate and understand what the health requirements of our city are. That's their job. They're supposed to say, hey, this is good. No, this is not necessarily good. That's what the whole process of going through the city council is. So, I'm not someone that, is against builders or against all that, growth and development. I think that that's their job. That's what they want to do. It is the city council's job to determine what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, what's a good fit, what will be an undue burden. So when it comes to the moratorium, I don't know enough about what the proposal is. I know that she's saying a year. I could see some merit in that, saying that we need to catch up with our infrastructure. That's a big thing that I hear when I'm walking around neighborhoods, is people say, I'm not necessarily against the growth. I'm happy, I understand that it will happen. But we need to make sure that our commitments to the current residents of Palm Coast, those folks who have made their investment here, are taken care of, So like where I live close to an area where there's probably 4 or 5 developments all being worked on and cleared at the very same time. And there hasn't been any infrastructure changes yet, to my knowledge. I know that down the pipeline there is infrastructure additions being made for like Royal Palms, and that's already a busy area. But we're adding all this extra density, and instead of just doing that, why don't we get ahead of it and say, well, this density's been approved. We need to make sure that infrastructure is taken care of, whether it's roads that need to be adjusted to make sure traffic doesn't get too backed up. So when it comes to the moratorium, I need to know more information. To me, it's a little soon to say, hey, we're just going to stop building homes, or is it all?
It's homes. She said
just
residential.
Homes? Okay.
Residential in the city limits.
So I don't see a lot of people having trouble with the, there are, there's like I always say, there's a spectrum of folks that say, we're ready to stop all the growth, and then there's other people that say we love the growth, and in the middle, there's people that say we understand, and then we will, but we just want our infrastructure taken care of. So, the thing that I hear people say that they're concerned about the most is when you're clearing these big swaths, and we're saying that there's 350 homes coming in this area, right? So, I mean, does that include that? For me, I'd like to hear more. I'd also like to hear more from the business community, how do they land on all this? I just need to hear more before I would make a commitment to that, just because there's so many moving parts, and then there's just not a lot of details, because it hasn't been seconded. It hasn't been seconded on the city council yet. It's come up twice now, and it hasn't been seconded. And I think that's because there's not enough there's not enough meat on the plate yet to really understand what the proposal is. And so that's what makes me uncomfortable with it.
Okay. So since we're talking about infrastructure, there's obviously 2 very large sources of infrastructure that a lot of the complaints center on. And I want to start with traffic.
Okay.
Obviously, that's something that anyone who drives has been dealing with as we grow. And there's a lot of concern about how it's going to get worse as it continues. The state of our roads, the fact that there's, in some cases, in some areas, too many cars for some of the roads to handle. So if you're elected, how do you plan to combat the growth that's currently happening with the roads as they stand?
And like I mentioned before, I live in an area that is going through that, and I can probably say that there's 3 areas that are really going to be hit hard with traffic over the next 5 to 10 years, and that is the Royal Palms Town Center area, the 100 and Seminole Woods intersection, just because there's so much going in there, and then there's only really one way out of Seminole Woods going north, and that's going to hit that intersection. So we're looking at a pretty significant increase of traffic there. There's some dense development coming in on the north side of Palm Coast. I think the L section recently approved a big, so that is also going to see some increased traffic. So 2 things that I think I've heard from residents that they would like to see change. One is when you're going to have these developments come into town or into an area, they put those posts up that are, they're small. So I think that they should do a better job of notifying residents that these things are coming in so they can come and speak about them at the meeting that they hold. And then number 2, I think that we really need to do a better job of what the city's planning is as far as the traffic. So what is the plan? If there's not one, we should know that, so that way we can come and advocate for it. If there's one 5 years from now, I know that the 2050 plan has a bunch of infrastructure things on there. A lot of the roads are listed there. In the ones that I mentioned, they're listed there in the 5 to 10 year portion of the plan. I would like to see it all just built out perfectly, dated, and when they expect everything to be done. And then, because people don't always know how to get online and find these things, I think it should be more marketed and advertised out in the community so they understand. Like on Royal Palm, I think that it'd be nice to know what's the plan. I know that they're putting in turn lanes on the Royal Palm and Belterre intersection. Right turn lanes in each part of the intersection. Let everybody know that so they know, and it's gone before city council. But just do some kind of a marketing campaign to say, hey, this is when this is going to be done. Relief is coming, that kind of thing. Just so residents know and understand that they are the priority being taken care of.
Okay, and the second set of infrastructure, I should say, is the utilities. That is and has been a topic of big concern among many residents. First and foremost, because our utility rates are significantly higher than a lot of other communities here in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, this year, the city of Palm Coast came into an agreement with the DEP, and now they are being forced to raise the utility rates on residents, I believe by spring of next year.
I saw something about that.
In order for them to build that next set of plants.
Yeah.
So with all of that going forward, now we need new plants, and the residents are upset because they're the ones footing the bill for growth when in their eyes it should be funded by the people bringing the growth.
Yeah.
So where do you stand on all of that, and how do you plan to try to balance?
You asked so many layered questions. So first of all, I'll address the fact that I knocked on a lot of doors and people said, hey, we're new residents here from this part of Florida. Why are the rates so high when it comes to water? And there's other people that say that, we're a community that has one of the best the lowest taxes in the state of Florida. So there's some disagreement there when it comes to that. And maybe it just depends on your perspective on that. So when we're talking about the water treatment plant and the sewage plant, this is the effect, in a sense, of kicking the can down the road. We have other projects, too, that have been put on the back burner that are coming into, are going to be necessary for us. And one of them is really important to the folks out in the C section is the canals, the dredging of the canal. So things like that have been kind of pushed down the road because we're tight. Our budget is tight. And as you can see, how when you go to the budget meetings, how tight things are. It really is. It's tough to know how we're going to pay for these things. Impact fees, I think, would be a great way to utilize some of that new growth into if we're going to build a new plant, then we can use our impact fees for that. But if we're repairing existing infrastructure, we cannot use impact fees for that. So we either have to foot the bill, which means that our like you're saying, our rates are going to go up, or we have to do what the city council was trying to do as far as these bonds. Either way, it's going to cost our current residents. It's going to cost us. Whether you pay for it over 30 years or you decide to just do it now. I think that this is a symptom of the problem of kicking things down the road. So we really need to have a plan put together and prioritize. Now, like I said before, our budget needs to prioritize, and I think water and sewage are very high on that priority list, along with safety in our roads. Water and sewage is up there. So that's what we need to be spending our money on. And if we need to make adjustments to, departments, that's the tough decisions that we're in. We cannot continue to keep kicking the can down the road, because now other entities are getting involved and say this has to be done by a certain time. So we just need to prioritize things, whether we go to Tallahassee, whether we work with a new business that's coming into town, whether we work with impact fees. All that stuff needs to be exhausted, because to just put that on our residential homeowners, our property tax folks, our folks paying property tax, it's just becoming too much of a burden for them. And right now we're in a favorable tax situation because housing prices are high. If housing prices were to take a hit, our budget would also take a hit. So we'd be even in more trouble now if we can't handle our priorities when things are going well. We're going to have a big wake-up call if they're not. So,
all right. And my last set of questions is going to be on the hunt for the new city manager. So,
okay.
As you know, Denise Bevins was let go earlier this year.
Yeah.
In a very shocking and very public manner.
Yeah.
Knowing that there's an ongoing process and the orders have been sent out to start collecting candidates and looking at resumes and all of that, what are some things you want to see in a city manager?
Yeah. So if elected, we're going to be making that choice. The new council, I think, is going to have to hit the ground running with this decision. The big thing, I really have three things that are important to me. Number one is, education. Someone who is educated in, running a city. The other one is experience. And I don't mean someone who has 20, 30 years of experience. I want to see someone who's experienced in being a successful city manager. So they can come to the interview process and say, this is the system that I believe in. I've had experience running the system, and these are the results that I was able to get. And those results should be like lowering taxes, condensing our processes, reducing government. All those things I think are going to have to be, high priority as far as the results that we're looking for. But it's going to have to be someone who has a history of getting results. So they won't come with a bunch of theories and say, hey, I'm a good person, I'm going to do this and this. They can say, I'm a good person and I've done this and this. And these are the results that I had in my previous job. And this is the system that I'm going to run when I come to Palm Coast. And this is the system that I'm selling to you guys. And whether we like it or not, that will be the decision of the council. And the third thing is ideally it would be great to have somebody that was from here, just because it would be beneficial for someone to have knowledge of, our history. But I know this is going to be a national search. We need to get the best candidate possible. And I think that person, if they're not from here, they have to have a dedication to getting out there. Just like someone who campaigns, you have to get out there and get to know what's important to people. they would have to, that would have to be a high priority for them, is to get out there, find out what's important to the people of Palm Coast, so that way when they do, when they run essentially the city, that's the first and foremost thing that drives their mentality. So those are the three things I think I'll be looking for, and I hope all the candidates will be looking for, because we need someone educated who's going to present results and who has a dedicated mindset to the people.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and answer our questions. Pleasure as always. Thank you so much for watching. You can find this video on our Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and on our website.